Hi, it's Fran from Living Your Greatest Life. In my last video, I spoke about things that you may want to avoid doing. So this video will be a continuation of that. So if you're a targeted parent and you're going to find these tips useful, stick with me. As we know, being a targeted parent can be so disheartening and so difficult, and very often it's like a bit of a battle zone and you're not really prepared with what's happening. Things sort of spring out at you and it's very hard to navigate that kind of situation as it unfolds because things are getting kind of thrown up left, right and centre. So these are just some points which may be helpful. You might want to consider them. One of these points that may be useful is showing no compassion to your children. Sounds ridiculous, right? Because they're our children and of course we would show compassion. But by that I mean sort of understanding that actually, which sometimes we forget, and I think maybe people around us forget, that actually those children in that situation are often being targeted too, and they're undergoing a massive amount of psychological damage or manipulation without actually realising it. And so obviously we don't want to make too many allowances for that, but at the same time compassion is definitely necessary. So it's just a nice balance between creating boundaries but being kind of compassionate and understanding, yes? Now I think another thing to remember is that in these situations, very often they are so challenging, so challenging that even the most placid person is likely to feel like they just want to say something inappropriate. So you are targeted maybe from both levels, from the ex-partner, whether they're a narcissist or another type of toxic personality, but you're also being kind of targeted in a way from your children. And sometimes things get said and they are really quite dramatic, very powerful. They can make you very sad, even very angry, and typically, which is a really common thing, to make you feel like you are trying to defend yourself. You're always on the back foot trying to defend yourself. So in that respect, I would say, even if you're a really placid person, just don't lose your cool. And by that I mean don't respond, don't react to these kinds of things. And you know, very often they are recycled stuff from adults, usually the alienator. So just let them maybe rise just over the top of your head, just count to 5, count to 10, and just really think about how you're going to respond to things that may be being said to you which are either unkind, triggering, making you sad or whatever. I think that's something you may want to consider. Now, obviously, in this situation, even if you were quite confident, it may be that you're actually losing confidence about, you know, your ability to parent. You may be being undermined by the alienator, the alienator's family, and sometimes maybe for people who don't understand your situation, you may be being undermined or sort of questioned by them. And I think even the most confident of parents may find themselves in a situation where they feel like their confidence is being stripped, even if it's been rebuilt since presumably leaving some degree of toxic relationship. Even if it's been rebuilt, it can be very hard to maintain that confident structure, and it's really important to do that because if you don't outwardly show confidence and show that you're a solid character, that actually probably is going to equate to the fact that the child or children may want to or prefer to be around the alienator, particularly if they have a narcissistic type personality, because they would exude confidence. And you know, so it's a really important thing that even if you don't really feel confident, that you present as confident and maintain being grounded. That might be useful to think about. No, when you're lacking confidence and you're starting to feel tired and feel worn out, for some people they may kind of a bit withdraw from their children and maybe feel the need to spend less and less time with them or give up altogether. And of course it's typically and totally your choice, but that if you sort of withdraw because you're worn out and stuff, that's going to give the opposite message to maybe the children that you want to give. I think one really important point within this subject of things to avoid is not listening to your intuition, because our intuition is there for a reason, and very often we just bury it and ignore. But your intuition is very often trying to tell you something, and I'm not suggesting for any means that you should go around being completely, sort of worried about everything and have a feeling about everything. But I think there is something to be said about noting what your body and mind is telling you, that kind of feeling. And I think that a lot of us, had we have listened to that intuition, we could have saved ourselves a lot of hurt. So your intuition's there for a reason, so use it or lose it. I think another thing to really avoid is for you to tell yourself that the children will work it out in the end, or for other people to tell you, oh, it's okay, they'll work it out. Well, actually, owing to the fact that they are very often in a kind of like cult-like abuse, the chances of them working things out and really seeing the true picture without some sort of level of intervention, whether it's therapy, reunification therapy, without some sort of help and support to see that, the chances are they're not going to work it out for themselves. It's not, I think very often in domestic abusive relationships, maybe as adults, we may have a little light bulb moment, and that's where it hits us and we think, yeah, this is really wrong. But children rarely do that. So I think maybe it's silly to assume that they can work it out for themselves, because sometimes children even get to adulthood before they can work it out for themselves. And certainly for me, in my life, I was into my 30s before the penny dropped for me. So how are we supposed to expect our children to work things out for themselves in that regard? They're going to need a little bit of help, I think. And my last and final point for this video is about not letting your guard down. So don't have a false sense of security and let down your guard. I'm not saying that if the co-parent is trying to show that they're willing to work with you, that's great, go with it. But just be mindful of the things that have already gone on, because there's every likelihood that unless that person has had some sort of level of intervention, that's likely to return. So it's almost like you are actually in a psychological war. So don't let your guard down, have a full sense of security, just be really aware. So yes, that's my last point, be aware, because things can be subject to change, I really hope that I made a difference to someone somewhere, and maybe, some of you have found some of these points useful. If you want to hear more, obviously subscribe, and please feel free to comment. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your experiences. So take care of yourself, hold your head up, and I'll see you next time.